Well, we're finally preparing to actually glue our nose block in. We've got to be careful about where the location of our side members are. And there's a very faint little mark here that marks 6 inches back from the nose, in this case, for where we line up with the mark on our strong back for our steering post. It's a critical measurement. We're also taking care to remove the residue from previous gluing. We've basically saturated these pieces with epoxy, and in the process of curing out, what happens with epoxy is it produces what's called an amine blush. Basically, as the cure is taking place, some of the components of the epoxy are floating to the surface in the form of a waxy residue. And in order to facilitate a good glue joint the next time around, we need to remove that wet residue, either by sanding it, which we have done to both of these components, or by chemically stripping it. Some people use soap and water. I'm one of those big fans of the idea that if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't work. So we're using acetone. Well, we're getting ready to glue some components in, finally. We've got a piece of wax paper laid down in here because we would like to be able to remove the boat from the building jig and the strong back after we get done building it. And if we don't do something like this, we'll never get it off of here. Blessedly enough, we can still see all of our marks right through the wax paper, so this is going to provide us a nice scenario to be able to do it. We'll see how things go. If they work all right, we may go as far as the first bulkhead with this thing. Otherwise, it will probably be the nose piece. Here we have our entire nose section in place. And after our little weigh-in, we've decided that maybe we should do a little something to lighten things up a little bit, because we are mighty close to not making our minimum weight. So we've relieved some of these bulkheads of a little bit of their weight, and hopefully this will help out a little bit. Now it's time to apply the glop and also the air nails. Here we have our completed nose piece, our whole area basically for the mast step. We got this all done last night. It was an incredibly gloppy mess. Basically, we put in the nose piece first, glued it in, put some air nails, little ones here and up in here on both sides, and then put our clamps on here. We've got the whole thing basically lying in wax paper so that we don't glue it to our molds here. And first glopped up everything, got it all set in place. Put our little teeny bulkheads here in the front end and our forward part of the mast step, and put these clamps on everything to hold it all in place. And as we were doing it, of course, we realized a lot of our glue wanted to run out, so we thickened our glue with some wood flour and came back and kept on wiping fillets, if you will, into the sides of all of these corners until we had a nice even glue bond. This took quite a while because you sort of have to wait for the glue to get very tacky as you're doing it. And now this morning, basically, we because there's a curve in this center member coming up the deck. I don't know if you can see that, but you have to basically spring this thing into shape, and so we had to hold this end of it down with this lead weight. And some wax paper, of course, so it doesn't stick to it. And then this morning, we're coming back here, and fortunately, we were very careful about how we fit our pieces. So there was really very little sanding to do, but we had to come back in here and level this back out again. We don't want to change our side profile, so you can see here, you can still see glued areas. And that's what we want to see, because if we start sanding down past those areas, we will change our side profile. So you have to be careful. Anything else that goes past that, well, we'll just have to put some fill in it. All in all, things look pretty good. This is the bottom side of our boat, which we flipped over to clean up a little bit. Some of the glue, well, gravity obviously takes it down to the bottom, and it collected along the bottom edge of our piece of wax paper, and so we are cleaning it up here in preparation for making fillets in these joints. These joints are quite small, and we want to make a little bigger fillets in them. And these joints, which is the front of the mast step, we are going to actually add some pieces of wood in and expand the glued area. So the mast step having the potential to carry about 1,500 pounds of load, we want to make sure that load is transferring into the hull pretty well. So we're going to increase the surface area, which we can do with little triangular pieces of wood glued on, and that will help prevent this from tearing off the sides of the hull. We work in this, it's pretty fresh. We're able to cut most of our flashing that existed off on, that was laying in pretty good sized pools along the edges of all the glued areas, as gravity takes it to the bottom. But in this stage of the game, it's pretty green, and we can cut it off with a razor blade and then clean it up with our sander. I think we finally have most of the components together and fitted that we are going to need for our mast step assembly. It involves fitting with great tedium a number of very tightly fitting pieces. Here you can see how the crossbars for the steering are set into this bulkhead. Here are the little blocks that will hold our steering post. Here we have a separate little foot that will form the forward edge of the cockpit sole and support the cockpit plywood on the top and the bottom. These are done as separate items. Here's the mast step itself, which we modified a little bit because we were concerned that the other step as drawn was going to put the fasteners for the mast step hardware quite close to the edge. So basically what we did was we notched out the front edge of this to accept this piece of plywood, which we'll try and knock out of here right now so you can see the rest of this thing. Obviously we've relieved a whole bunch of this, drilled a bunch of holes in this thing, and this is the assembly. We're going to assemble this mast step assembly as a separate entity, put it in the boat, and then assemble the rest of this stuff in behind it, because I think it's how we're going to be able to make everything fit. But this is probably one of the most complicated parts of the boat. Once this is joined in behind the bulkheads we already have, this forms pretty much the entirety of the front end of the boat. Well, we were pretty busy last night and basically got what amounts to the rest of the front end of our boat assembled. The mast step area is now together with our alternate plate in here to accept the width of the screws on the back side of the mounting plate without getting too close to the edges of our piece of wood. This was quite an adventure putting all of this together. It was very slippery. So basically what we ended up doing was assembling our mast step initially, this little box area here, and after we had all the components together, we basically added a few judicious air nails to this thing to hold everything together, and then put it into place where we discovered that the greasiness had sort of made it go out of square a little bit. So we tapped it back into shape, and at that point it seemed to us like it might be a better situation to simply assemble all of it in one shot. That way we knew that we could get it square and keep it on the lines that we had drawn on our strong back, and also transferred to the sides of the boat. We're pretty pleased with the results, actually. This has come out pretty well. We at this time added this little step here, which is going to hold the cockpit floor, and we put little fillets, very small ones, into each one of the glue joints. The glue, of course, wanted to run out of everything, and you can see there's kind of a white cast to it because we'd added some thickeners to it in order to help hold it in place. The glue itself wants to run away. Here we've got our components, if you will. And we added some of the white powder here and a little of our wood flour, which we collect in our little sanding equipment, and so it's a very fine material also. This stuff, I don't know if I can get this open. No. But it's a very fine white powder. When it's mixed with the epoxy, it makes it stay in place better. So when we coated the front edges of this and this seam running vertically here and in the back after we had our box together, we really don't want to be losing our position or have any gaps in this thing. So we put thickeners in it, and then we air nailed it here in 4 places on both ends, and that located this assembly onto the bulkheads. And then the bulkheads also got little air nails on the top of them to hold them in place, and a few in here, of course, to hold these slippery steering blocks into place. We also made fillets last night. You can see them here on the side. This is a stiffener, and it basically increases the size of the glue joint. You mix up your epoxy and then add thickeners to it until it has a consistency of peanut butter or something a little stiffer, and then you can take a tongue depressor or something like that and work your way up on these things, making a nice even fillet out of this edge. But all in all, things look pretty good. I think we're getting pretty close to the point at which we can glue the back end of this boat together.